Hello and welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Karyappa.
And I'm Gunjan Saha, and together we break down the biggest headlines from India's growing startup ecosystem. If this is the first time you're tuning into this channel, please consider subscribing because we talk everything startup. And if you're a regular listener, don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends. In this week's episode, of course, we'll be covering the news around Byju's. In the latest update, investors have voted to remove CEO Byju Ravindran, but that matter is pending at the Karnataka High Court. Google released image generation capabilities for its Gemini, but is that large language model actually racist since it has been generating only pictures of people of color? So we'll try to talk about that. In other news, PhonePe has launched the very first indigenous app store for India called the Indus OS, and IRCTC has joined hands with Swiggy for pre-ordered meal deliveries. Well, if you are still someone who regularly travels by train, you can now order food straight to your seat. Also, last week in an interview with Nandan Nilekani, Uber CEO Dara Khushro Shahi said that if we can succeed here, referring to India, then we can succeed anywhere else. So, a lot of exciting updates to discuss in this week's Roundup. But before we dive into these headlines, Roshan Air India recently released the safety video, and that video very beautifully depicts the various dance forms in India. And another aspect of that, it's all women who was there, and that's a fantastic, fantastic video. Really reinvigorating the whole India identity.
Yeah, Air India is the pride of the nation, right? And I feel like it can be a luxury airliner. I'll stick my neck out and say that, right? I think if you revive some of this classic, traditional sort of a motif, which is what this video also aims to do, I think it could be that, right? So kudos to Prasoon Joshi and the team who have sort of come up with this fantastic, fantastic video.
Yeah.
Makes you proud.
Yeah. And what else? What else from the week? The India Test Series is on.
The India Test Series is on as of now. I mean, India is trailing by 134 runs. We're depending on the batting talents of Kuldeep Yadav to get us across. So I'm not very positive about it. I just hope we don't go into the next match 2-2, right? I mean, let's see. So yeah, that's where we are.
Awesome. Okay, so the previous 7 days has been full of activity for the Indian startup ecosystem. The biggest headlines involved Byju's. On February 23rd, which was last Friday, Byju's board of directors had called for a special EGM, and in that, over 60% of Byju's shareholders approved resolutions to resolve issues of governance and financial mismanagement. One of the key decisions taken was the removal of co-founder and CEO Byju Ravindran. The shareholders who called for this EGM include Process, General Atlantic, Peak 15, Sofina Chang Zuckerberg Initiative, Owl Ventures, and Sand Capital Management, and they represented over 30% of shareholding in the company. However, in this board meeting, Byju's founder and his family skipped the EGM, and on late evening of February 22nd, Ravindran wrote a letter to shareholders saying his and promoters' absence would invalidate the EGM proceedings. A Karnataka High Court order barred enforcing any of the decisions taken in this EGM until the next hearing, which is on March 13th. And this order came earlier this week on a petition filed by the company against its investors. So I don't think the Byju's story making headlines is gonna phase out anytime soon. But can you give us a recap of what's exactly happening and what can people expect?
Well, we've covered this plenty of times on the Roundup, and somehow every every few weeks or so, I mean, there seems to be another development, and Byju's is in the news for the wrong reasons, right? I don't know if that AGM had quorum and what those ground rules are. Right, but this is sad. I mean, a lookout notice is pretty serious, actually, right? Which means to say that he is considered as a flight risk, right? So, and which also means that his travels are confined to within the country as well. So he can't go to Dubai or UK or wherever else, right? Yeah, not a good look. Definitely not. Right, I think it's gotten to a point where it's only a matter of time before the investors take control of the company, have some kind of professional management in place. See, the edtech opportunity is still intact, right? I mean, online education is still very, very low single digits in terms of the total share of the pie. So that is still up for the taking. It just requires diligently run company to sort of do what is necessary, right? So yeah, let's see what happens.
So Byju's was, at its peak was valued close to $22 billion, right? But both of us can agree that as a company, the reason why it was started, Byju's was doing a fantastic job. So this kind of raises the question: is a founder still capable enough of being a CEO when the company is actually a very big company?
So that's a great question, right? I mean, very, very few have scaled to being CEOs at that scale, really, to be honest. Right? I can think of a couple of examples at the top of my head. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Mark
Mark
Zuckerberg
Zuckerberg, yeah.
of Meta. And Zuckerberg is especially incredible because the guy was a 22 year old kid, right? I mean, out of college, and he has become this fantastic CEO of a nearly $1 trillion market cap company, right? That is so important. uh, yeah, I mean, it's difficult, but the good founders kind of recognize their limitations, they recognize their blind spots, and are able to sort of complement those with good leadership hires, right? Which is what is very essential as you scale. As you scale, the decision making cannot be as autocratic or as centralized as it was in the 0 to 1 journey. You have to build complementary strengths within your management team. You have to trust people to go out there and do what their expertise is, and so on. Right. So while the founder can still retain the vision, I think the management team, the leadership, and the board, right? A lot of the times, board is just fancy dressing, but the board becomes really, really important, right? Because they act as a sort of a moral compass in some way, to sort of keep the business on an even keel, right? And with a lot of these startups going IPO now, it's particularly important that they have in place all of these checks and balances, and there is good governance, from early on.
Hmm. Kind of makes you think about the fiasco that happened with OpenAI, right? After the entire ousting of Sam Altman and coming back a few days later, I mean,
This
even the
kind of
board was
thing
reshuffled.
happens more often than we like, right? I mean, you can think of Uber, another famous example, right? And yeah, there is this fantastic series called Super Pumped. I think I saw it on Geo. um, Definitely check it out. It chronicles the founding of Uber and up until the exit of Travis, right? And I've heard people say, I don't think there was another founder who could have built Uber from its 0 to 1 journey, because it required someone who was bullheaded, who was passionate, and who had the gumption to sort of take people on, right? And I don't at the same time, I don't think there was another person more mismatched to sort of scale Uber from the time they went IPO and whatnot,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing, leading companies. I mean, it's perhaps the most difficult job in the world, I would say.
Well, but the trouble is not only while you are scaling a company and keeping it at the scale, even if a company has, really become one of the largest companies in the world, troubles still come up. Despite shipping at a very rapid pace, Google is having a very frustrating month. Last week's Gemini 1.4 breakthrough was overshadowed by OpenAI's Sora, and now the company is facing major backlash after its AI image generator went viral, but all for the wrong reasons. Gemini AI stirred up a lot of controversy, including criticism from Elon Musk when it altered historical images. It changed a race of traditionally white individuals and even well known personalities to people of color. People have claimed that Gemini shows bias, suggesting it has a hard time creating pictures of white people. This has led to claims of ideological overreach. In a statement on X about Gemini's capabilities, Google wrote, "We are working to improve these kinds of depictions immediately. Gemini's AI image generation does generate a wide range of people, and that's generally a good thing because people around the world use it, but it's missing the mark here." Now, in one of the accounts that I follow, Matt Walsh on Twitter, he has put out a very interesting thread as to what could be the reason for the AI generating such images, and he suggests that it could be just the principles followed within the company. He refers to a old video of Jen AI, who is the director of Google's responsible AI team, and says that Google's commitment to anti-racism is a key component of their AI work. And maybe that's why people are, claiming that the output of Gemini is of ideological overreach. So, what do you make of that?
I thought the most incredulous or rather ridiculous thing about this story would be the fact that Google's chief of AI policy or ethics is called
Gemini.
Gen AI
You can't
or
make that up.
Genai, right? You can't make that up. I mean, talk about like a role name fit. But yeah, look, I mean, Google curates results, right? I mean, that should not be surprising news for anyone. It's just that I think they kind of overreached on this one. They extended their hand, and it became fairly obvious, right? When you search for an image of Vikings and a bunch of Zulu warriors show up, right? I mean, yeah, or when you search for the founding fathers of America and a bunch of black dudes show up. I mean, it's severely racist actually if you think about it, right? I mean, yeah. So this whole DEI culture in Google and broadly in Silicon Valley, right? More so, very exacerbated in Google. It has been a problem for ages. The tech leaders have all spoken about it, ranging from Paul Graham to Balaji Srinivasan to Mark Anderson and so on and so forth. They've all talked about how this culture of meritocracy is being killed by this DI culture, right? Where merit is being compromised for either skin color or sexual orientation or gender and things to that effect, right? And what we saw last week was just a ridiculous display of that, right? So Thiru, our producer, did his own bunch of research on this, right? I mean, while we searched for Vikings and so on, I mean, racially correct folks showed up, but then I mean, we searched for Hindu priests, and guess what? I mean, not a single male showed up, right? I mean. I don't know. So this is obviously like superimposition of some kind of ideology at a gargantuan scale, right?
Yeah.
For sure. And it's pretty dangerous when you think about it, right? I mean, you talk about rewriting history. I mean, think about what would happen, one or two generations down the line, right? I mean, we're laughing about this stuff, but this thing can sneak in and become very omnipresent. It can become the general truth if you don't really do anything about it. So, which is why I think I think we need to really support pure open source LLMs and projects on AI, right? Because otherwise, I mean, the organizations are going to impute their bias on all of these results for sure. So, yeah.
Google did release its own open source LLM called the Gemma, right? But that also, I don't know how it's performing.
It's just such a sad eventuality for a company that we once thought will be responsible for flying cars and all sorts of things, right? I mean, I've made the point earlier. Google had this moonshots project, which I would often go to the website and see what cool stuff they're up to. And today, I mean, like for the first time in about 15 or so years, I am actually considering moving my Gmail to something else. Elon famously mentioned that he's going to come up with the Xmail, right?
It's
I don't
currently
know.
under works.
Yeah, I don't
Allegedly.
know. I don't know if it's that or moving the Apple ecosystem, but I certainly am losing trust with the Google ecosystem very rapidly. Because they do all kinds of crazy things, right? Like sunsetting products, right? I mean, they're sunsetting Google Podcasts, for example, right? Which worked perfectly fine, right? It was a harmless little product. I don't know. So
Yeah, they're trying to bring the whole Google podcast functionality into YouTube itself, right? But we have seen this very often with Google, the number of times they rebrand their own products and relaunch it. And I think this happens every time that a new head takes over and kind of paints this picture that, hey, this product is now going to be Google's latest cash cow. So all of this rebranding and all is very frequent in Google. So this is a very classic thing for Google, right? To sunset few products and rebrand it and make it like sound like it's going to be the latest cash cow for Google. In fact, Thomas Kurian, who is the CEO of your Google Cloud, he tweeted out saying that we are introducing a new offering called Gemini Business, which lets organizations use GenAI in workspace. And then a user replies to him saying that, "Hey Thomas, can I pay it with Google Pay in Google Wallet, which replaced Google Pay, which replaced Android Pay, formerly known as Google Wallet? If not, we can jump on a call to discuss billing. I'll send you an invite on Google Meet. The enterprise Google Chat, previously Duo, which replaced Allo, the replacement for Hangouts, the ring brand of Plus Hangouts, which replaced Talk and Voice." So let's try
That's
to
a
make sense
hilarious
of that.
thread. Yeah, it's a hilarious thread. I mean, it's sad but true. I was just reminded of Allo. I mean, Allo was supposed to be like the social
It was supposed to
network
take
and
down
stuff.
FaceTime
Yeah,
when
I
it
mean,
came out. Okay, so Google is not only coming under the scrutiny for renaming its products or for what Gemini is doing, but even Rajiv Chandrasekhar, right, a union minister, said that Gemini's response to a question about PM Modi were in violations of India's IT rules. The new controversy involved Gemini offering questionable responses about Prime Minister Modi while being circumspect with regard to questions about other world leaders. This comes days after Mr. Chandrasekhar said that the draft laws to regulate the AI space would be brought about in June or July this year. So looks like Google really has a lot of fires to douse.
yeah.
They'll be kept busy. Well, but the Google bashing really does not stop. This episode is actually turning out to be a Google bashing. Last week, PhonePe also announced the launch of the Indus App Store to take on Google and Apple. So a lot of the founder guests we have interviewed in our podcast has voiced their concerns about the, how they twist the arms of founders in terms of the subscription billing, the revenue apps made, the commission they have to pay to Google and whatnot. But this is PhonePe's attempt at creating a more competitive and localized mobile app store economy for India, which, by the way, is the largest app market in the world in terms of downloads. There is a growing clamor among the Indian startup ecosystem for more free market competition in the mobile app store space. Fantasy sports and gaming apps like Dream 11 were not allowed on the Play Store until last year. What Indus App Store will allow is for game developers to choose any third party payment gateway for in app billing, and they will not be charged any commission if they use an external payment gateway. At a later date, Indus will also provide its own in app billing and catalog solutions, but these will remain strictly optional for app developers.
Hmm.
So, what do you think? Is this the respite app developers were looking for in India, and is this something other countries can emulate?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a good alternative in that sense, right? But I don't know how much adoption they will get, right? I mean, they're on Lava, Micromax, and a few of these other OEMs, right? So they might be looking at maybe 15-20% of the smartphone market as such, but the lion's share is still owned by Apple and Google, right? So yeah, it's going to be difficult, but it's a worthy challenge, I should say, right? They're not going to charge the hafta that Google charges of 30% on the billing, right? And look, I mean, I think in a previous episode we made the point that a year from now, or perhaps this year itself, Google will have to start negotiating with all of the big apps because
Yeah.
they're not going to pay those kind of fees, right? Some of these business models are not at all sustainable if you're going to take 30% off the top, for sure, right? So Google has had to negotiate with Epic in the US. And similarly, some of the larger folks here will do the same as well, right?
Yeah.
There's all kind of antitrust implications and so on and so forth. So this is great. I think PhonePe did a great job acquiring Indus OS. Right, they have about 400 million users or so.
And over
Right,
26 lakh apps.
yeah.
on the Play Store.
So if anyone can do it, I think it's probably PhonePe, right? I mean, I would have bet on Paytm, but I guess they have their hands full with everything that's happening at their end at this point. So yeah, it'll be great if the Indian app ecosystem kind of comes together and supports Indus OS.
So the tagline for Indus OS is India's App Store, right? That kind of made me think in the lines of, should countries start owning app stores, and like kind of whatever profits are generated be it used to, I don't know, can either be redistributed or whatever used to make improvements.
I mean, it's an interesting question for sure, right? I mean, because what is at stake is so huge,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the app business itself is, multi-billion dollar business. right? And should a private entity sort of be the gatekeeper of that? I'm not very sure, right? So we might see some kind of regulated public utility kind of system going forward. A lot of these things, right? I mean, I feel like it's all Web 2.0 ish.
Yeah.
So some of these systems and applications will have to kind of evolve, right? It was great because it kind of increased the pie, and it made services accessible for everyone. But we're at a point where the gains from this is sort of marginal, and then some of these other aspects, right? I mean, whether it's the billing, the security, the algorithms in terms of what they show first, next, and so on, right? Who they privilege and so on is being called into question, right? So I think some of these difficult decisions will have to be taken, in the imminent future, I would say.
Yeah. So, in other news, IRCTC is partnering with Swiggy to deliver pre ordered meals straight to your seat in the train. On Thursday, IRCTC announced that the train passengers could now access the official e catering portal of IRCTC to order food from different restaurants. In the first phase, Swiggy will provide food delivery service at 4 railway stations, which are Bangalore, Bhubaneswar, Vijayawada, and Vishakhapatnam. But this is not the first time that IRCTC is partnering with any food delivery platform. Last time, around October, they announced a partnership with Zomato for ordering and supplying food at different railway stations. Now, I really don't travel by trains very frequently currently, but would you order food through Zomato or Swiggy in a train?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean,
For
it,
me, the biggest concern would be what if the train leaves and I miss my food.
I'm sure that there will be enough processes to kind of take care of this, right? Because I'm sure that more other people will have the same concerns as well. So this, I'm actually old enough to remember that this food delivery to trains, right, has been an old concept. I mean, people have tried it before, but yeah, obviously nobody had the scale of Swiggy or Zomato to sort of manage the logistics and the operations as such, right? So I'm actually excited to see how this could pan out. And IRCTC is the largest transport network in the country, right? And they have a massive number of people commuting every day,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, this can give phenomenal scale for these folks. I mean, if they kind of get it right in a pilot fashion at one of these places, right? So yeah, even a fraction. I mean, even if they're able to serve a fraction, I think it could be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing I want to call out here is so I used to travel a lot by train, especially when I was in Darjeeling, right? And I remember the food quality was sorry to say the least,
Yeah.
right? But recently, again, I was traveling in that same route from Kolkata to New Jalpaiguri, and IRCTC was doing the catering. And I have to say, the food quality served on trains is now at par with the food served on flights. It's yum, it's hot, it's healthy.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to travel by train. Just haven't found the opportunity. Maybe I'll take one train to like a Vande Bharat
Yeah,
to
let's do
Chennai
a
or
Vande
something.
Bharat
Yeah, we
journey.
should. We
Yeah.
should, right? I mean, do a like a food plus train review. But I've heard very good things as well. I mean, things tend to generally improve over time, right? Whether it's services and so on and so forth. So yeah, but this is an exciting collaboration.
Yeah. All right, just like a podcast, huh? It's improving with time.
Of course, hopefully.
Speaking during a fireside chat in Bangalore with Infosys co-founder and other architect Mr. Nandan Nilekani, Uber CEO acknowledged the difficulties posed by the Indian market, stating, quote unquote, India is one of the toughest markets out there. They are so demanding and do not pay for anything. If we succeed here, we can succeed anywhere else. Now, a lot of media outlets are, just quoting the part where he says they are so demanding and not pay for anything. I think that is a bit misquoted. I think the real point that he was trying to say is that if we succeed here, we can succeed anywhere else. And I think that's pretty true for a country as diverse as India and for a consumer base that's, always asking for cheaper cost, better quality. If you can crack the code here, then you have a solid product to sell to the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, full sympathies to Uber as well, right? I mean, they've been in India for about 10 years now, I think, and it's not been a difficult game for sure. India is hard to execute. right? I mean, whether it is Amazon or Uber or any of these folks who've kind of come from abroad, I mean, they've all had to Indianize sufficiently, right? I mean, yeah, it's hard. India is a very, very hard execution game, and obviously, I would say the Indian user is value conscious, right?
Yeah.
Not just cost conscious. And 50 bucks in India goes a long, long way, right? I mean, more than perhaps a dollar would in the US, or a pound would in UK and elsewhere, right? So yeah, I mean, props to Uber. I mean, they've kind of stuck it out in India, and they've recently turned profitable as well. Right, this collaboration, or this being part of the ONDC network could be interesting for them, right? I mean, they can use their same driver network to perhaps deliver goods as well, which hasn't kind of worked out for them
Yeah.
as yet. Right, so let's see how that pans out.
Yeah, I think before COVID, they really tried to deliver these goods using the Uber Eats platform, right? But however, that got acquired by Zomato, but Uber is did fairly well in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So let's see what this partnership with ONDC will pan out like. Before moving on to the talk of the town section, here are the biggest highlights from the fundraise side of things. Rento Mojo, which is a furnishing rental brand, raised 210 crores or $25 million from Edelweiss Discovery Fund, Chirate Growth Fund, and Magnetic. Walko Foods, which is the parent company of NIC Ice Creams, raised $20 million from Jungle Ventures. Yulu, which is a electric mobility company, raised $19.25 million from Canadian auto parts manufacturer Magna and Bajaj Auto Limited. And Varaha, which is a climate tech startup, raised $8.7 million from RTP Global, Omnivore, Orias Venture Partners, and others. There's also cloud kitchen aggregator Ghost Kitchens that raised $5 million from Gujarat Venture Finance Limited, NV Ventures, Let's Venture, and Lead Angels. So a lot of exciting headlines from fundraising.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't heard of cloud kitchens in a while, I mean, it was all the rage about, a couple of years back or something, right? In fact, Travis had invested in cloud kitchens as well, right? That was his new startup. Yeah, good to see some fundraise activity on that front.
But one thing interesting to note here is Yulu's fundraise, right? They raised funds from a Canadian manufacturer and Bajaj Auto Limited. So what I'm trying to understand is how do founders actually decide? Do you need strategic investors like an incumbent from the industry, or do you need venture capital firms and private investors?
So strategic investors can add a lot more value beyond just the capital itself, right? I mean, it could be maybe like a trusted brand perception. It could be the distributor network. It could be the science and the R&D expertise, so on and so forth, right? So you will find a lot of these OEMs, the conventional folks, investing in the newer players for sure. And from their perspective, I mean, they're just hedging against the future, right? I mean, so yeah, I mean, I see this as a win-win, basically.
Awesome. So moving on to the talk of the town section, Roshan, you put out a really interesting tweet. Would love to get the breakdown of that. You wrote, "We saw that businesses that were trying to solve this problem were all getting acquired. So we ditched that idea, thinking it won't scale beyond a point." This is by a founder on the podcast. Compare this to everyone and their uncles trying to build e-commerce or listing businesses in the 2009-2010 era with the classic 1% of market share and exit to strategic slides. When I tell you how much more ambitious the current crop of founders are and how far we have come as an ecosystem, you won't appreciate it unless you've seen that era. What a time to be alive. Smiley.
Yeah, what a time to be alive. Um, you won't guess how many people tried to build the Flipkart of today. I mean, and I'm not just talking about people who just like put up a website and whatnot, right? I mean, serious businesses at that, including folks like, for example, Shopclues, Jabong. All of these were funded, man. I mean, they raised, probably like close to 100 something million in funding as well, right? And Jabong, for instance, was funded by Rocket Internet, right, which was hugely popular, German firm, right? So a bunch of these folks tried to start businesses because there was a wide space, and they also saw this as, okay, what, worst case somebody will acquire us, right?
Yeah.
That was the thesis. Similarly, bunch of folks started in the classifieds business as well, assuming that whenever there is a consolidation, the sort of rising tide will sort of push them towards a strategic acquisition of sorts. And so I was pleasantly surprised when I was talking to Manish of Fellow, who you guys will hear on an upcoming podcast, right? When he said that, while he was contemplating a bunch of ideas, he thought of this one idea and then happened to see that all the folks who executed on that idea were being acquired. And so he thought, I mean, perhaps there is no scale in this, right? And decided not to do it. So, I mean, that just shows how much ambition the current crop of founders have. They just want to think big. They're not just starting a Me Too business as such, and which is fantastic. I mean, it shows how far we've come, really.
But also that comes with the generations as well, right? I mean, the PT and Flipkarts were probably the first, actually the second generation of starters I would call. First would be the Infosys and the likes. And now we are having so many startup mafias within India, the Flipkart mafia and the likes.
This
so it's interesting.
Yeah, this kind of selective amnesia, right? I mean, that's actually beneficial. People who are not burdened by the burdened by history, actually. Right, because then they're free to think of new possibilities, and they're not chained by the constraints of yesteryears. So yeah, man. I mean, like, whenever I talk to founders on the podcast, I'm always like kind of gobsmacked at the amount of ambition, the amount of drive these folks have. It's amazing. It's something to behold.
Awesome. What a note to end this podcast on. But wait, before we actually end this episode, you mentioned about having a founder. Can you tell more about that conversation?
Yeah, so I spoke to Manish of Fellow. I wanted to talk to someone from the fintech world to understand what's really happening, with Paytm, RBI, and what is the larger significance of this on the ecosystem. So this was a fantastic conversation, right? I really can't wait for you guys to listen in. We'll perhaps publish that sometime early next week, so you guys should definitely check it out.
Yeah, and if you want to know when the episode is coming out, do follow us on our social media handles, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and of course the podcast platforms as well. And what will really help us is that if you leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, I think that is the single most thing that helps us with discoverability. Also, don't forget to do all the good stuff, like, share, comment on this video, let the algorithms know this is a great content. And we'll be back again next week with more exciting updates from India's growing startup ecosystem. Until then, take care and have a great week.
Bye, guys. See you.